So you say.
In the back there. Wait.
Abel and Luann, Officer is. We haven't been here in almost 10 years.
I say, I know you.
Welcome back.
Anybody else?
These folks here.
Oh, we're just here for Carl.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you're the other couple I heard.
Yeah.
I'm Steve Thomas, and I brought my dad, 92 years old, who's passing the Rocktown tradition to me.
Keep far up, come Agate Club. Okay, is anybody else? Anybody else do? All right, hey, go and tell us your names and why you're here.
We've been looking for rocks for years now, and we want to get, involved with a club. My name is Doug Barker. This is my brother Lee Barker.
Do you want me to say your name?
Sure, from Canada.
Okay.
Lee's wife.
Whole family.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Judy Madsen. This is my son Brian. We came to hear Carl. I've known Carl for more years than a lot of years. Yeah. So I came to
He
hear.
doesn't keep on talking to you about all this stuff?
No, he does.
Well, that's why we're here. We want to hear more about it.
Welcome.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay. Hey. Yeah. We're starting our thing. Does anybody know about anybody that's not doing good? Sick or anything like that? Because we know about Tamara. She took a bad fall and the whole side of her is just black.
Oh dear.
Black and everything, picking up all downstairs. Yes.
How's Mike and Levon doing?
As, they're doing okay and everything. Mike's in
Care Center,
Care
and
Center.
Monday we're meeting to get his discharge date.
Well, good.
All right.
Very good.
Yeah.
And Levon's doing well too.
Well, without any more to-dos and everything, anybody else say anything? We'll
Nope.
start on with, program.
Happy
Here's Carl
crappie.
Carlson and the Brown and Club.
Whoops.
This club has always been very kind to me through the years. Probably in the mid-80s, there was about 5 or 6 people in this club that told me that I had to come to speak at this club. And so through the years, it kept reminding me, and so through the years, I keep coming. Now, I'm not picking on anybody, but when I look at the calendar for the year, always on the fourth Friday of February, my name is there. And it's been going on now for 4 years. So they didn't put my name up there. I'm not complaining. I'm glad somebody's looking out for me. Anyway, Ellensburg Blue Agate. Neat stone. Some of you know me. My background, jewelry store for 42 years. I like gemology, and so I kind of specialize in that. I got a degree in geology. So what happens is that once we started getting this blue agate, I'm supposed to know everything about it. But it took some time. And so what happened was that this stone, what started it all out, just so happened to be, and it's going to be hard for you to see it, but afterwards you'll be able to see it, is a rock. And this rock happened to be Ellensburg blue. My grandfather found it in 1964 up there on First Creek. And so, but he never could tell my dad where he found it. And so my dad was going up there periodically. And in 1968, he took a friend of mine up there. And of course, we had horses. And so he rode through that country, figured he could cover a lot more territory doing it that way than just walking around. And he found this little rock right here, and he put it in a saddlebag and forgot about it. And that winter, he's messing around and he's looking at this and he thought, oh yeah. And so what he did is he went out and got the rock. And there's something about this rock that's kind of unusual. They fit together. So my dad knows where my grandfather found this. So then the next day, when they were up there riding through, the friend found a piece. They were coming down off the mountainside, walking down, and the horses kicked up a rock. And then my friend there picked it up and said, is this what you're looking for? Where'd you find this? Well, right here, the horse just picked it up. So what's interesting is the history of those two rocks, these three rocks, I should say, and then the other one. It took my dad basically 13 years to find the source of that other rock. And he was always looking for it, and it was down the bottom was where he found it. And so when he would go up on the hillside, he'd find these little chips of blue. And so as he was finding them, he'd ask me, well, what should I do? I said, well, the old timers would go on a hillside and dig a grid, and then come back, and well, of course they were panning for gold, they would pan the grid, so the stones would just go right up to the source. And so he started doing that, and over a period of a couple of years, he got near the top of this one ridge, about 50 feet down, and he said, well, I haven't found anything since, you know, I'm looking. And this is where I told him, do you find any clay? And they said, yeah, there's a clay layer there. I said, dig it. Because what happens is sometimes on these veins, they rub together, and the decomposition of the iron and the clays and so forth, it'll make a clay layer associated with the vein. And so he did that, and then the next Tuesday morning when he came to work, he had a smile on his face from ear to ear. He had a little coffee can, 5-pound coffee can, and it was full of Ellensburg blues.
Was what?
Full of Ellensburg blues.
Nice.
And so what I told him is that when you dig it in, when that clay bends down like that, where you're going to find the stones, and exactly where he found them. So we had the opportunity to go and stake the claim. And having worked in geology for a mining company, I've staked several claims for them, so I went about doing it. Then what I did is I went down to, at that time, Ellensburg had the headquarters for the Forest Service all up in that area. And I went to the head ranger, and I told him, in a lot of places you can't claim quartz. But how about this Ellensburg blue? And I showed him some of the pieces and said, you can claim Ellensburg blue, it has more value. So that's what we did. And so if you can go to the next slide. This is the stone that we were digging. And what happens is that this blue, if your memory is good, you saw the real pretty blues across the top there in the previous slide. These ones aren't so pretty, but they do have the blue. And this is where too, yeah, you cut a stone out of there, but some of that other stuff you cut. And so this is where too, well excited about finding the vein and baking it and so forth. But there's a problem now. What's the definition of an Ellensburg blue? Because people are coming to me with rocks and saying, is this Ellensburg blue? And so all I could find out, and everybody tells me, you find a blue agate around Ellensburg, it's an Ellensburg blue. But because we were a jewelry store, my dad was cutting out stones that would be very, very top stones. Top stones being all uniform color, no fractures, no designing. And so that's what we were cutting for the store.
Did it have the pink in it?
Was that?
Did it have the pink in it? Is that it?
We'll get to that in a minute. 'Cause
Okay.
You'll see it here coming up. This is where too, and so what happens is there's a lot of pretty Ellensburg blues that have designs. But as a jewelry store, we were just cutting the very, very ones that just did that. And we found that 95% of the stones were not cut out the way we wanted it to cut. So Ellensburg blue is kind of elusive. And that's what we're starting to find. If you just start cutting the stone, you got a blue stone and cut it, 50% of the time it won't come out blue. And this is where too, that blue color isn't always all the way through the stone. And it can just be on one edge or something, and if you then cut that out, you cut yourself a good stone.
Refractive.
So I had to figure out, how am I going to identify stones and show things? Well, in the diamond grading, you always have master stones. The master stones are such that it's already been pre-graded by the GIA, so you know exactly that color, and you bring the other stone up to it, and then you can compare the colors. So that's how you determine whether the diamond's a G or an H or whatever. And so as the years kind of went on, we found a little bit better stones, and we're cutting out some nice stones, but not a lot. And so I had a lot of stones there. And what also happens is that being in gemology, you learn how to look interior at the inclusions. And the inclusions can tell you a lot about the stone. And when we were digging, and you can kind of see some of the stuff that's in here, I found at that time, the Ellensburg was always the dirty stone. It always had the most junk in it. Now, if you're selling it, you probably don't use that terminology, but for rock hounds, you understand what I'm talking about. And so it was hard to get stones that didn't have all that stuff in them. I didn't understand why or whatever. But anyway, we went through that period. I could identify gemstones. I could have the rocks, because when they brought it in, I got a microscope, I got a light, I can go and get it and look inside and then compare to what we have, and that's how I could identify the stones. So that was 1981 is when we found and staked it. 1988, my dad was walking on a abandoned Forest Service road that they were going to use for logging, and he found this little chip of blue right down there about the size of your fingernail. And so we were used to finding little pieces. So he goes to pick that one out. It's not coming. It turns out that it was probably every bit as big as what this one was. And so he got excited about that, pulled it out, but he knew I was coming over that evening for something, I don't remember what. And what happens is that he covered it all back, because it was at lunchtime. And that evening we went up there, and the reason we went in the evening, you can always hear a car coming. And from one spot there, you can actually see across First Creek. See, you now know where it's at. Across First Creek there, you can see the road, and people drive in sometimes. And we didn't want anybody seeing what we were doing, because we haven't staked the claim. And so we came out with about a 5-gallon bucket half full of some nice size pieces. That was the beginning of what I call, and you don't know if you noticed it on there, from the Carlson mine. That was in this middle of this road. We asked the Forest Service, can we dig in the road? And they said, as long as you put it back the way it was when you leave, and block it off so people don't drive into it, you can. So for 25 years, we dug in the center of that road. And that is just where it is, all along there. And that was the first stones that we found. And so some of the stones you're going to be seeing here, if you look for Ellensburg and so forth, you won't be seeing what I'm going to be showing, because we only found these stones down 10, 12, 15, 20 feet. And one of the stones I have here tonight, I'll have on this pad here for you to look at, was one of the feeder stones. Down low, there was the stones that were really pretty blues, and they didn't have a lot of fractures or other things. So what was happening as the stones come up closer to the surface, then they spread out more, and then you get these more inclusions and more things like that in it and so forth. So, but this is where somewhere along the line had to go and change a little bit, because we were going down, and I told my dad, we're going to have to quit digging 20 feet down. You know what's going to happen if somebody comes along and so forth? What happens at cave-in? But we never had a cave-in or anything like that, but we did an amphitheater and so forth. That was 1988. Then we go along, and we get some real nice stones now. In 2007, I came across the lady, TV, last name was TV. She was a senior at Central Washington. and she did a paper on agate, and part of it was Ellensburg blue. Somebody told me about her, and so that's where I went, called her up, and went over and talked with her about what she was finding on things, because I had an interest in finding out more things. Well, this is where too, her professor that was over her was Paul Hoskins, Dr. Paul Hoskins. He was the head of the geology department. And so he went and actually did some work on the Ellensburg, and he wrote a paper and published it and then spoke on it in 2005. It was in Colorado, and it was the beauty of the blue of the Ellensburg Valley or something like that. And what was so interesting is all the questions I had on the Ellensburg got answered on that paper. But there was one thing I disagreed with him on, but this is where too, he had the microscope that can look down into the stone to see these tiny, tiny little things. Well, agate, agate is fibrous. And so what he was finding was tiny, tiny little spheres in amongst the fibers. And he was finding that it was only in the blue, not in the gray. And so the veins, a lot of times that he had blue and gray in it. And so he went across with nothing in the gray, but always in the blue. And so he was also looking too, is that sometimes you got more spheres in the darker blue than you did in the lighter blues. Well, it turns out those spheres are 1/10 the wavelength of visible light. And 1/10 the wavelength of visible light reflects blue. And so when you get up in the sky, water vapor that size, that's how come you get the blue sky. And with the Rayleigh scattering, the blues will go and, how does he put it? They'll reflect their color many times more than what some of the other stones will. Some of the other colors like a red or orange or things like that. And so he was looking at them and trying to figure out what the spheres were. And he went and said, well, it's probably silicon. And so I got through that part, and I'm thinking, now wait a minute. Thermal conductivity was what I used to identify gemstones. I couldn't do the refractive index because it would give me an eye problem, which one of our people here has had, called iritis. And so your eye isn't good for about 4 months, and it's painful and it's swollen. You got to use cortisone drops and deadener drops and all this other type of stuff. And so this is where too, I didn't want to do that all the time. And so that's where the refractive index fluid would cause that to me. So that's why I didn't do it. But with thermal conductivity, what I found, my cousin had just gotten one in, a newer one, and I was in at the store, and I went and tested my stone, and I'm thinking, this isn't testing right, because quartz is SiO2, and on the thermal conductivity, there's a little bar there where quartz always goes up into that bar. And my blue was not making it up to the bar. And so when I got some of the better blues, they were farther away from the quartz than what mine was. And so quartz has, agate has water in it. And water does not conduct heat. And so to me, is the more blue, the more spheres, the farther it's away. It's got to be water that's in there, because if it was silica, like he thought it would be, it would measure just like quartz would measure up. So that's where I disagree on him, and that's where too, understanding that deal, that's where I started understanding the actual Ellensburg blue and looking at it and seeing the little under 40 power magnification where you have a strip of Ellensburg blue, and right next to it is gray, and then another strip and another. And so, but they reflect just like they do in the sky, and makes the whole stone look blue. And so you think you got yourself a good stone until you cut it. And so if you don't have magnification to go and look at it close, you're going to have a problem. And so this is where too, it was really nice to be able to get that. And you can go to the next slide. This is if you're interested in geology and stuff like that, this is the Blue Agate of Kittitas County by Central Washington, and misspelled Hall. But this was sponsored by the Friends of Mineralogy in Colorado, and they had a 4-day deal where people would come in and give their talk on agates. That's all it was agates. And that's where Dr. Austin went and did that. And so that gives you a lot of insight into the stone itself. It also has what they call moganite in it. Moganite, he said, had 13%. Well, a lot of people don't know what moganite is, but after tonight you will. So,
Morganite's pink. Morganite's pink, right?
now, let's see.
Is that what makes the pink glowing? It's the pink glow in the...
The next thing that happened after that, on getting this stuff digested and so forth, I had my dad change where he was digging, and he went and dug in the third spot. And that was what they call a hydrothermal vent, and that's where hot gases would come up through the rock in a big circular area and kind of toasted some of them and altered some of them. The basalt in there was no longer black, it had a green rind on it because the black biotite and hornblende was altered to chloride, and chloride is green. But what I'm finding was that that particular spot there finally set it in motion as to why it is where it's at. And what I was finding was that up at that upper digging, there were veins. These things are formed in veins that are near vertical. And in that area, they all were going north 50 degrees east on the upper road. On that third place where we dug, when he got down about 12 feet, we ran into another vein. It's going north 50 degrees east. And then you go down to where we first started out and line up those three, and they're heading north 50 degrees east. Then you look at First Creek, and up there, it's going north 50 degrees east. Well, having worked for a mining company as an exploration geologist, you learn how to use contour maps to tell you where major faults are at. And so what a major fault is if it's going up one side of the mountain straight, and you go over the top of the mountain, come down on the other side, and there's a spring and water coming out, and it goes straight down and lines right up with the one on both sides there, you got yourself a major fault. So with a major fault, that's what got down to the rhyolite. Well, how does the rhyolite enter in? Well, what happens is on some of those fractures, rhyolite would be the first thing that would come through these fractures, forming a vein. And then what would happen is that after that cooled off, then the center of the drain would kind of break apart, and goethite, which is an iron ore, would come up through there. And then after that occurred, then the Ellensburg would come up. And so this was an interesting thing from the standpoint that they always said it was in the Tianaway basalt and vesicles. And vesicles are air bubbles. And then they just fill up with quartz. And so when I met Dr. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but anyway, that's what I found. The next thing, let's see, go to the next thing. Oh, no, this one, stay here. 2018, I met this guy, Wes Ellensburg. He came up to the claim with his wife and another friend and his wife, and they were looking for Carl Carlson. And well, I guess I had that person. And we got to talking to him. He says, I live in Liberty. My wife grew up in Liberty. We got all these articles on the gold in Liberty and all the mining and so forth. I wanted to go and write something up with Liberty and Ellensburg Blue. So I'm looking around trying to find Ellensburg Blue. And he says, I'm not having very much success. Well, he says, well, how would you find it? And I would say, good luck. Because you very, very, very seldom ever see the blue. But this is where too, in a couple more slides, you'll get some insight into what you look for if you're going to be looking for Ellensburg blue. But got through talking to him, and he and my dad got along well, and he would come and help us dig. Problem was is we'd be digging there for about 3 hours, and he'd leave, and 15 minutes later, that far in, I'd find an Ellensburg. And so when he would come back the next day, I said, hey, this is yours. It's an Ellensburg, yeah, it's yours. Well, why is that? Because that far in from where you were digging is where it was at, so it's yours. And so we got to doing, he would cut some stones and so forth. But he went and did something that, you know, when I told you about the thermal conductivity of the stone, I gave him some Ellensburgs to play around with, cut and whatever. And so he heated them up. He took one blue agate and heated it up to like 400 degrees and let it sit for 24 hours so it came back down. And then he would take a picture and weigh it before he did that. Then he'd take a picture and weigh it. And then he did that all the way up to like 1100 degrees. Well, by the time he got up to 1100 degrees, guess what? The stone was pure white. No blue whatsoever. And the stone had lost about 3% of its weight. So
The
where did the water go?
The water, yeah, evaporated.
So with him doing that and with thermal conductivity testing it, that's the two things that I back up as to why I say it's water and just not silica in there. Well, that's where too, he got going, and this is where too he decided that I needed to start writing something. And so he kept asking me questions, and my geology degree was way back when, and I'm having to figure out how to answer these questions. So I started going, and so we got going on things and so forth. Then he introduced me to Nick Zentner,
Yep.
and he's a guy that if you watch YouTube and seen him, he's one of the few teachers that I know of that can take a dull, boring subject and keep you interested.
Oh, he's fab.
Because rocks are sometimes boring to some people. And so when I met him, I was kind of interested. I was thinking, I want to meet him, but what I'm going to tell him is completely different than what he's teaching.
Oops.
And so after we met, had a mining convention, he talked on the geology, my friend talked on the gold, and I talked on the Ellensburg blue. And when I got through, of course I had a lot of samples there to show and back up what I'm doing. And he saw that, he's never seen that many blues, that type or whatever. And the first thing he asked me is, did you ever find Ellensburg blue form in the Tianoid basalt? And I told him no. But I've found Ellensburg coming up through the Tianoid basalt. So that meant it had to be there, and this came up afterwards, so this is younger than the Tianoid basalt.
Through the cracks?
Yep. So that got him thinking about some things. In fact, here he referenced me while Christmas time on the north 50 degrees east. I told him about it, but it didn't sink in until he did some other studies of everything. And then what he did is he saw the stones, and I gave him some stones so he'd have master stones to go with. And he introduced me to Angela Halfpenny, and she was doing SRF studies on agates. And so she did 65 of my stones and did the XRF on them, and then used that as a master to compare. It turned out there was no other blue agate that she went and tested that had zirconium in it. The Ellensburg blue has zirconium in it. And the other blue agates from around the world do not. The other agates that were in the area do not have zirconium in them. And so she didn't really tell me, but I figured that if that hot water that's carrying the Ellensburg blue up and is coming up through rhyolite, rhyolite has zircon, so it has zirconium in it. it's absorbing some of that zirconium out from the rhyolite, and that's why you're getting it in the pieces that we tested and so forth. And so that's where she wrote this article here on the Ellensburg blue and stuff like that. So let's, next. Okay, now we get down to the stuff that you guys want to learn about. And this is where too, you'll notice that on this side right here, they're all brown. You walk right over them, across them, away, and so forth.
Lovely rind.
But, you know, those blues on the other side are just the bottom. And so look at the diversity of colors. And you can see that if you memorize these colors right here, and you're up in that area, then this is going to be associated potentially with Ellensburg, because all the other area up there is basalt. Basalt's gray. And so the rocks are black and gray. They're not brown. You can get some iron staining sometimes, but it's just a tiny little thing. But this is what you're finding, and you can see from the light, and then look different things and so forth.
Are those like 3 and 4 and 5 inches big, or are they littler?
This one right here is probably close to 10 inches.
Oh.
That one right there. So these are bigger pieces.
Right.
That's why you don't find these where you're surface digging, because we always found these at depth. There are some that will be found up close to, and I've seen some that are pretty, but again, you don't find them like we do. The next main. Okay, this will help you out. Piece of Ellensburg blue. Of course, you know where the blue's at. And so basically you have iron staining up here, and that's what you're seeing on the outside of the rock, on that brownish and so forth. This is the goethite. This is iron ore. If there was enough of it, they would mine that for iron ore. And the rhyolite is the tan and grayish type colors. And also too, if you notice that they're kind of circular, some of these are. This is where too, when you find some of the Ellensburg blue down where the cattle are grazing and stuff like that, you wonder why the surface has all these half little cups onto it. Those are goethite. The Ellensburg formed up against the goethite, that weathered out, and so you get all this texturing of these little half cups on there. So that tells me it's the same as where I'm at up there. Morganite. These tiny little
MG, not more.
crystals there.
Morganite.
And Hoskins determined that 13% of the Ellensburg is morganite. Well, here's what's interesting. Agate is SiO2, quartz is SiO2, morganite is SiO2. So how do you tell the difference? Well, agate is cryptocrystalline, you won't find any quartz, any crystals. So what are these crystals doing here in this area? And then this is where two quartz crystals, you get the actual crystals and stuff like that. This kind of shows you too, there's a darker blue right around those crystals. This is where too, I say that is a gel as opposed to a liquid. And so a gel came up and could coat to the edges. And so once it gets into like a jello composition, you still got the heat, and see these you'll have flow structures and different things kind of coming up through it. And so you still have the heat, you've got supersaturated solution, and so crystals can only grow when you've got stability, temperature, and constant feeding of what you need. So all the time these are growing, this is kind of coming through as kind of a little bit on the hard side. So that's the kind of the thing that you find in the stone. So next. Not all the time does everything look like it's going to turn out blue. These are just quartz crystals. This is actually quartz. And I'll get another piece and I'll show you a little bit more better on that. there is some blue on here, but just because we find it in the diggings doesn't mean everything we find is blue. And so, you know, some can be pretty pale and so forth. Next picture, please.
See, I would think it'd be great just to find that. Just to be walking along and see that. That would be like the most awesome thing. So, I apologize, I'm just a founder, you know?
And that's for two, some of that actually, some of the pieces have a real pretty blue underneath it. And you don't notice it when you go and polish it. This one's here, you see how the bullet type on there, there's your rhyolite. This is a darker piece, but see, it looks like, I'll get a better picture of it. Here it is down here, you see these white spots and so forth going through here. The water, the Ellensburg blue is flowing through here, but not so much through here. Yes, you get a couple on the edges. Next picture. Oh, well, this is the pretty Ellensburg, because it's got some neat design in it.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is for two, you guys can figure out what you see, but according to me,
Forest.
this quartz crystals up here are like waves in a storm going through. Well, anytime you got waves, you still got movement of water underneath it. So here's this bottom of the waves kind of coming through. And then you get a more stability in through here. And then you got all the seaweed and all these other stuff kind of coming out. And I don't know what this little guy is, but he's somebody. You got some steeples over here and so forth. So it makes some real pretty pieces. And I'm going to be having more of those pieces available because I'm taking and slicing them and then mounting them in a little stand where you don't see what holds it. It just sits in a black form, and there it is right in the center.
Cool.
Really intriguing. But it'll be coming.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Would this be more valuable than the clear?
Technicalities.
Okay.
From the standpoint that to you it may be more valuable, but the very true blue is going to be the most expensive. But
Sorry, if you went too far. There you go.
okay. Back.
One more?
Back.
Okay. Okay.
Then go to the next one.
Okay.
Oh, This is a feature that tells you in a vein, when you're at the very top of the vein, no more solution can make it up to and so forth, and is lacking on solution to fill up cavities. And that's what you're seeing here. Of course, after it got put in place, then that's when the quartz formed like in the center of the geo. Well, on all of these here, go down 12 feet, and they're solid. And the colors look better down the hill. So this is how you can tell, and we've never found any Ellensburg blue higher than where we were digging on that road. And I don't know of anybody else that really had it. But you take where that road is, I think it's 4,100 feet, and you go clear down to Lower Green Canyon and go out. You got Ellensburg clear down there.
In that fan, right?
In the canyon itself, and then when it goes out from there,
Yeah.
you got it all out there. And this is where then where we're at, and so forth, I don't know, 2,500 feet down there or whatever. But you got over 1,000 feet of elevation, I'm thinking, 1,000, 3,000, 2,000. Over 1,000 feet elevation where you find Ellensburg blue. And that's what happens on some veins, is that they can be that amount. And this is where I'm getting off on my own little deal, but get back to the depth and so forth. Lower Green Canyon's a fault. It goes north-south. First Creek is a fault, goes north 50 degrees east. If you bring those two together, there is a rhyolite outcropping right there. And so what happens is that the fault that goes down First Creek, they know about it, the geologists know about it, but they don't know where it goes or whatever. And this is where because they've been making jewelry for a lot of years, there's been people over there, Reeser Creek down there, and where the cattle and the horses are at, that have brought stones in to us, and we made rings out of them. So it turns out, the coating on those stones are the exact same as what we were finding up there 1,000 feet or more up above in the vein. So to me, those stones aren't brought in by water. Because if you go water, if you've ever gone steelhead fishing and gone down the rivers, you've got big boulders, gravel bars of varying sizes, water source. And when people find the Ellensburg out there, sometimes they find a small piece and a big piece and a medium-sized piece, and they're all right there. If water was coming through, they would sort it out to where you would find the big ones where the water velocity started to drop, and the small ones way out where the water velocity takes it clear out like that. So that's one person's opinion. Nobody has said anything different, so, oh well, on to the next one. Okay, you see all the little mogonites all along and through here. And so you can see this one is flowing here, but you still got a little bit of a Ellensburg that's not quite the same, you tend to be a little darker, it comes right along and so forth. Next.
Pretty.
This is a quartz vein, there's some rhyolite. But what we found is that the vein's going north 50 degrees east, but there were some quartz veins that it cut through. And those quartz veins were kind of heading more north-south. And so what would happen is some of the Ellensburg would go up into those quartz veins. The quartz veins separated somehow, and they got up into that. But you always notice it's a lot lighter color. And this is where, too, if you look at this, this is the Ellensburg up here. This is reflections of the blue in here, and here's the quartz crystals. Next. Again, just look at all the design in through there. Sometimes it helps you see where the blue's at and where it's not. But all this other stuff in through here. Next.
How does the rocks form like that? The design or the color?
Okay.
I mean, how do you know what to look for?
It's the outside.
This stuff here, because I cut this, you won't see this until you cut it. But this is where, too, this has to be there first. This came in second. This rhyolite, goethite, and this white stuff came in third, and then this came in fourth. And so, however they move things apart and then pushes things in and so forth. What's nice about doing this talk and so forth, even though I have a degree in geology, I'm just explaining what I found. If I was going to school, I would have to be more detailed and do the chemical composition and all this other type of stuff and whatever. But I like it this way. Next.
It almost looks like blue lace.
Yep.
Yeah, this part does. But see here, you got that edge, which is a different color, and the blue lace won't have that color. They'll have this color here.
Right.
But on this one here, the only blues are, this vein right here is Ellensburg blue. And you got a little bit of it here. All the rest of it is being reflected off of this, that scattering of light from the blue here and so forth. But this is where you start to get down deeper. You get this type of thing times minus with that. Let's go to the next one, because there's going to be something coming up. Okay, breccia. Only if you're a geologist, you understand this type and you like this type of stuff. For me, it tells me there's a lot of stuff going on down there. Because what's happened is that this is the rhyolite that's been broke apart.
And
so
floating
it's a
around.
hot vent coming up that broke it apart. And then the Ellensburg came up there while it was still apart and filled up the gaps, and then it solidified. So, kind of interesting.
That is interesting.
I found a tourmaline breccia And it was over where, what, land, Lucerne, and then go up to Holden, we used to have a big copper mine up there. And I used to hunt deer back up a couple miles from it, and I found a trimoline breccia like this, where it's all broken apart and the rocks, and then the trimoline could all build it up. And that was related to the copper that was down probably about 2,000 feet from where I was at. So it tells me more things than it tells a rock hound. Okay, next one. Now we get into problems solving. What's the color of Ellensburg blue? What happens, this was taken with an LED light. And LED lights on your phone and whatever makes things, it makes the Ellensburg always look bluer than what it actually is. So if you see it online and it's really pretty blue, chances are they did it with an LED light. This over here, these white spots are the edges of the box that had the light, so you don't get a direct light on it, but you get the reflection of the box into it. This was done under 5,000 Kelvin. When you grade diamonds, in case you want to know, you always do it on daylight equivalent, which is like 5,000 or 5,500 Kelvin. And you always do it on north lighting. And so north lighting is you can have all kinds of sunshine out there, but you go on the north side of the building and you still have light, but you don't have sunlight on it. So what happens is you get sunlight on some of these things and the colors change. Now, technicalities, the way I've got it figured out and so forth is the range of colors of an Ellensburg. But see, unless you take a gemology, it doesn't mean anything to you. It's slightly grayish blue, or very slightly grayish blue, or moderately blue. And then it also can be slightly grayish violetish blue, very slightly grayish violetish blue, and then violetish blue. And so these combinations can be found. But what I found is that there's always that little bit of component that the violet, not violet, but there's that other component that gives it kind of a royal look, gives it kind of a purple look or whatever. And so the Ellensburg is always a pleasing color. If you go to the next deal. Okay. This, you asked the question back there, does it show the pink or the red? Two stones, the exact same stone, you can kind of see. And what happens is that this is just normal light from above. And here's your blue. This is the violet, kind of coming along out here. And then this is all just quartz. And then you've got the quartz crystal there. Well, we backlit it so that the light came from the back side. And so this is the color. The problem with color is, what's pink? What's red? How do you define it? How do you see it? Well, as soon as you get into painting or gemology, you got to know that color and have that written down so the next person knows exactly what that color is.
Right.
And so way back when, old timers pick it up, that looks red to me, or that looks pink to me. And so you hold up the light and you see it, but it does its best if you got the violet behind it, because that comes through and then the violet back and through here and then makes that more like a pinkish lavender color. That's what I call it. You can memorize it and call it the way you want. But that's where that's the color you should be seeing on the really top stuff, because the top stuff won't just be blue or have that little violet effect to it. So forth. Next one. These are kind of a little bit on the light side, but these are the shades of colors that you're going to see. And again, the hardest part on this, and we've in the process of, we read up, Wes Singstrom and myself, we wrote up a booklet for the museum, like 58 pages. And it has explanations of some of the stuff that I'm talking about. It has pictures of some of the jewelry that's made. It has stuff like that. And it has some of those seascape type deals just for the kids. And it will put down there, this looks like, what do you think? So they can write in. And so it's designed for a museum, but still has enough meat to it that it's going to be worthwhile just to get a hold of one or whatever. And so you can see the shades and colors, but this is so hard to get because we could take the picture on the phone, put it in the computer, and it comes out different. And so you have to figure out what color do I have to put into the computer to come out like this, but we don't know when they print it out if it's going to come out the same way or not. That's the trouble with this fine light colors and stuff like that. And this one here, you can see the difference of colors. Try matching any of those stones. If your eye is good on color, none of these stones match because you can see just a fraction different. If your eyes don't see that, then they all match halfway decent. But this is run the jewelry business. I showed it to some guy who wants to get a pair of earrings. I say, well, these don't really match. He says, well, she'll never know because she's got one here and one here. And I said, you're going to be able to because when you give it to her, there's size. So, tough educating guys. But anyway, next one.
That's funny.
This is what I found to help me identify Ellensburg blues. This is done under 10 power, this is under 30, and this is under 40. And you see how these deals, they have points out and they're convex in, just like a holly leaf. So I call them my holly inclusions. And so this is what I'm seeing under high magnification. You don't see it when you cut the rock open. You might see it with a 10 power, but you got too much behind it and you don't have enough light behind it to make it stand out. So you'll look at some of the stones that you have, it doesn't have that. Well, give me the light, give me the microscope, and I'll show you those in it. So that's what I'm finding in the Ellensburg, is that it has this type of stuff in it. And so because I've never seen it in any other blue agate or any other agate, then it's one of my go-tos. If I see that in it, then there was a guy brought in some stones, and there was kind of a purplish blue, and the person that he took it into, he said, well, that's holly blue. And I looked at it and said, no, it's not. It's an Ellensburg.
Holly blue's got more purple.
Yeah, but we haven't seen some of the Ellensburg blues. They're very few. But that one could go that way. But it had the characteristic inclusion in it, the holly leaf inclusion. And when I saw that, I knew that that was the only one. Because I've seen holly blue and it hasn't had it. So, interesting. So, you backlight it, get it under high magnification, and you'll start seeing that. But there was a person made a comment one time, he cut stones, and he says, the nice thing about the Ellensburg is that no matter how thin you cut it, it always holds the color. And I'm thinking, where are you coming from? But he's selling stones that he's calling Ellensburg, but they're all opaque, and agates are not opaque. They are translucent. You can always get light to go into an agate under magnification. So anyway, next stone. Oganite. Here's the tiny little crystals. For years, I could never figure out what it was. Whether this was moganite or maybe, I don't know, little tiny quartz crystals, but I could never see crystal structure. And it wasn't until about August that I finally found a prismatic crystal that crystallizes in the monoclinic system of classification. That's exactly what moganite does. Once I saw that, I'm free and clear to say that is moganite. So very few people have ever seen it. Because what will happen is that this moganite here somehow, over a period of time, dissolves back into where it's just quartz. And you don't see the structure. And a lot of times you don't see the structure, but under X-ray refraction, you can identify it that it's got mogonite. Next picture. Just some of the pretty mogonites. See, they're so thin that this isn't high enough power. Next picture. Just happen to have a bitroidal
Wow.
texture on a blue. Kind of pretty.
Bitroidals.
On their actual light though, this is a little bit more purple than what this is right now. But either way, it's pretty. Next. Those are my hands. This is a piece of druzy. This has made some really pretty pieces of jewelry. What had happened was that it wasn't in the vein. It was an offshoot off from the vein. My dad was digging when he was walking, go down to lunch, and the sun was just right, and he's looking at the rocks, and there's a cavity there, and the sun went in, and guess what came out? The blue. And so he dug this out, and then what happened is the other side came out in smaller pieces, and so we made jewelry out of that and so forth. But this one here, I don't think so. This weighs 19 pounds, but it's not 19 pounds of blue, because the blue and the quartz are probably anywhere from 1.5 to 2 inches thick. But pretty. Next. Okay, you know Carlson Brothers jewelry. This is my dad's belt buckle, the first one he made. The problem, he miscalculated. He got down to Tucson and he goes and puts it on and about takes his pants down.
Got no butt left.
See my hand?
Yeah.
That's how big it is. And it's that thick.
Oh,
And
my.
it's got silver on the back. And he said, "You got any nuggets and so forth?" I said, "Yeah." And so he took my nuggets and put it on that. And the picture came back from my mom, and he had suspenders on each side of his belt. Forward and take his pants down. So then what he did, you can turn the lights back on and so forth. I have a belt buckle here, and then this is the one that he made to replace the one that he couldn't wear anymore because it was way too big. And so he took the rest of my nuggets out of that.
Nice.
Now, one last thing. Have you, everybody seen a goldfish?
The what?
Goldfish. So you know what a goldfish looks like?
Yes.
Just checking.
I thought maybe it was a trick question.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, what does goldfish have to do with rocks?
I know, we're talking about gold.
Are we gonna have crackers or?
That's what I was thinking.
There's 2 goldfish.
Okay then.
That's awesome. My friend Wes set it up that way. And here's this other one. And this is the one where right down here, there's a prismatic crystal that I saw. And that confirmed that is the mogonite, because it's according to the right system, the right crystal, that type of thing. So,
So that's all mogonite? That's all mogonite in your fish?
the mogonite is just the white.
Oh, okay.
This is the Ellensburg. Now, to put things in perspective, it's like, boy, if I could just have a goldfish that big. So this one here, there's a tiny little yellow thing right down there. That's the actual size of it. This is only 45 power. That's how come I could see that crystal with
All
45.
right.
So now you've seen a true gold fish. And with that, I'll close. But anyway, questions, I'll answer any questions you want.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some people came in, stuck in. They knew? Oh, you want to stand up and tell us your name?
Yeah, my name's Jack Rose.
All right, on.
Very nice.
How are you guys? You guys doing? You guys stand up.